So just some reminders before we get into the video. First reminder is to make sure that you're keeping an eye out and an ear out for the key word for this lesson. Reminder number 2 is to make sure you're taking notes. Include the date, lesson number, aim, and standards to help you refer back in your notes. Let's get to it. So welcome back. We are on Unit 3, which is all about percentages and percent applications. Today, we are going to be talking about Lesson 1. Your aim for today is going to be how can we solve percent problems using a proportion or an equation? And you're going to see throughout the unit, we're going to interchange using proportions and equations to solve these problems that we're faced with. And majority of these problems are going to be real world situations. So let's get into the lesson. I'm going to go over with you how to write and solve with proportions and equations for percents. And you might have heard of this and done this in 6th grade or maybe even earlier, depending on your teacher in the school. So when you have a proportion and you're trying to solve for percent, you have to think about your fraction. You have a part and a whole. So the part is going to be your numerator for one of your fractions, and then your denominator is going to be the whole. You're finding a piece of the entire thing. When you're thinking about percents, you're thinking about a value over 100 or out of 100. So your second fraction will have that 100 as a denominator. And then you have that percent represented above that 100. So it's going to be set up with part over whole with your percent over 100. Another way that teachers or you might have seen this presented to you, your part is also known as your is. So is or part over your whole or of. So how this is written, it would be is over of equals percent over 100. And then you also have your part over your whole equals percent over 100. The is and the part are the same thing, and your whole entire thing and of are going to be the same thing. So that's going to be important to remember. All right, so now talking about your equation. We're going to take those three things, your part, your whole, and your percent, and we're going to apply it to an equation. So A is going to be the part. So you have your part, which is going to be what you're going to figure out or how you're going to first set up. That's going to equal your percent. And that can be should be represented as a decimal because you're going to be multiplying that by the whole. So you're going to take whatever the entire number is, if you know it, multiply that with the percentage as a decimal, and you're going to get the part of this value. We're going to apply this for number 1 in both ways so you can see what it will look like. So for number 1, we're given what is 64% of 200. So think about the different parts that you have. You can start out what you're trying to solve for. You're saying what is, that's going to be the part. You know you have your percentage, and then the whole is of the entire 200. So let's set up our proportion. We know we have two fractions. One has 100 on the bottom because that's going to represent your percent out of 100. So you have 64 out of 100. You know your whole is going to be on the bottom, and you're trying to figure out your numerator and you're representing it as x. So here we have 100 times x, and then you have 64 times 200. So if you're trying to multiply and simplify, 64 times 200, you are going to get 12,800. And then remember, if this is what you're trying to isolate, you have to separate it using inverse operations. make sure you divide by 100, and you're going to get x equals 128. But let's check with an equation. Let's see if this works. So I'm just going to take A equals P times W. Let's see. Let's paste this here. All right. So we have our A, which we don't know, so we're just going to leave A equals. Our percent as a decimal, our 64% turns into 0.64, which gets multiplied by your 200. So now we have A equals 0.64 times 200. You are going to get 128. So both answers, or both, I should say both methods, is going to give you the answer of 128. Let's try the next one. Okay, for number 2, we have 5.4 is what percent of 45. So what I notice is that we don't know what percent is given to us. But we are told the part, which is 5.4, and your whole, or the total, or the of, is 45. So I'm going to set up my proportion as, I know my percent is missing. And then you have 5.4 over 45. Then you have 5.4 over 45, and then you can solve for x. So we have both 45x equals 100 times 5.4, which would be 45 equals, and then we have 540. Again, we want to isolate our variable. We want to make sure we then are going to divide by 45, both sides, x equals 12. So my answer would be 12%. Okay, so now this was with a proportion. If we decided to use our equation, so my equation is A equals P times W. I'm going to substitute this in. So 5.4 equals, and then I have my percent, which we don't know, times 45. So since these two are connected with multiplication, I have to undo it with division. So I have to divide both sides by 45. This cancels out. I'm left with P on the right and then 0.12 on the left. Now, 0.12 can be represented as a decimal. Or, I'm sorry, 0.12 is represented as a decimal, and you can then convert it into a percent, which would be 12%. So no matter what, your answer is going to be 12%. So 5.4 is 12% of 45. And you can always double check. Okay, for number 3, try it on your own, see what you get, and then come back and check your answer. So for number 3, we don't know the total. So we have our percent, we have the part, but we are missing the total number, the whole. So let's set up our proportion. And for these problems, I sometimes think proportions are easier. We have 60 over 100 equals x, and then we have 35 as the part. So we're going to multiply first, cross multiply. We have 60x equals 35 times 100. 60x equals 3,500. Then we have to undo by using division. X is going to equal, that's 3. X is going to equal 58.3 repeating, or 58 1/3. Now again, you can also solve this using your A equals P times W. That works as well. Okay, number 4. Try number 4 on your own. It's a real world situation. Once you're done, come back and check your answer. Okay, so here we're going to take 40%. So we already know a percentage. And you could always write this in the corner. So AP equals W. Okay, so we have our percent, which is 40%. I'm writing it down. Then we have the whole value that we're going to be given. Your paycheck is the whole entire value, 2,100. And then we want to know how much you put in the savings. So part of it is going to be in the savings account. So that's what we're missing. We don't know what A is going to be. That is our missing part. Okay, so let's use an equation since we used proportions last time. So A we don't know. We have 40%, which is 0.40. We're going to multiply that by 2,100. We're going to get left with A equals 840. So $840 is what's going to go into your savings account. If you wanted to see it with proportions, you would set up your proportions. You would have 100. You would have your 40%. You don't know the part, and you know the total is your 2,100. We're going to cross multiply here, and we're going to cross multiply here. So we have 100x equals 40 times 2,100. We're left with 100x equals 84,000. And then because we're isolating our variable and trying to find what that part is going to be, we want to separate that operation with 100 divided by 100. And we have 84,000 divided by 100, so we get x equals 840, which is the same thing. Okay, so make sure you write down the keyword and phrase. Make sure you write down any questions that you have for me, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.